Good afternoon. My name is Jacina Haston. I'm the chair-elect for the Solo and Small Firm section with the Florida Bar. I'd like to welcome all of our attendees for the CLE entitled Achieving Equality, A Pathway for All. Today, we are going to delve into the heavy subject matter of racial discrimination, implicit bias. We will also take a venture down the road of talking about the LGBT community. So I thank all of you for being here with us today. If you are not a member of the Solo and Small Firm section, I highly encourage you to do so. There are a myriad of opportunities as well as resources for those who are in solo or small firms. As a matter of housekeeping for today, this CLE is eligible for 1 credit of general CLE credit or 1 credit of bias elimination. It is up to you as an attendee to go to the Florida Bar's website to log your CLE credit on the member portal. Also, I would like to thank our annual section sponsor, Lex Helper, for their contribution to bettering our section. As a result of our CLE only being till 1 o'clock today, I would like to hold all questions that our attendees may have for the last 5 minutes of our CLE. So if you have any questions, I ask that you put those questions in the chat box, and we will establish the last 5 minutes of this CLE to answer those questions. Now, with all of that behind us, I would like to do some short bios so that we can jump into the meat of our presentation today. Our elite lawyer panelists that we have here today are LaShawnda Jackson. LaShawnda Jackson is a partner with Rumberger and Kirk, and she is the first African-American president for the Orange County Bar Association. We also have on the call today, Kamara Williams. He is partner with Smith & Williams Trial Group and a community organizer in Central Florida. Next, we have Nick Harris. She is the LGBTQ consumer advocate for the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. And last but certainly not least, my elite colleague, Mr. Doriki Gayuka. He's an assistant county attorney with Pinellas County, representing several agencies, as well as the Office of Human Rights. And so now that we have gotten these introductions behind us, let's go ahead and jump into what we are here for today. And I would like to fire my first question to Kamara Williams. Kamara, have you ever experienced discrimination in the practice of law? If so, how did you handle it?
I suppose the earliest thing I can think of, I have a number of different instances, but the one thing that I would like to focus on when I first got my bar license, and I was walking through, as most young attorneys are when they're walking through the courtroom, and they get to walk past the bar, and you know, you have your briefcase, and you have it's your first time, and you have your best suit on, your best tie, and you walk through. Right? Yeah, you made it. Right. And you walk through, and the court deputies stop you, and they say, you have to wait for your lawyer to show up, or one of my favorites, like you have to go back and sit down. You're not allowed past this bar, and I look at them, and I have my briefcase in my hand, and I have my my shirt, suit and tie, and I'm like, why'd you stop me? You didn't stop anybody else from crossing the bar. And it took a few years or a few months, really, for deputies to kind of get used to this, I guess, familiarizing with me getting through the courtroom, for them to say, okay, he's an attorney, right? But it's never assumed with somebody who doesn't resemble me. And I wish that was an instance that was only singular to me, but I've seen it happen with younger attorneys. I've had conversations with my colleagues, and they've had the same experience. And the worst part about it is when you go to another county who's not familiar with you, right? And it's like, okay, now we have to do this again, and
allow me to introduce myself, basically,
right? And so I think that was one of the first instances. And if I may, if I want to give a quick story, I was practicing a case in Lake County, and I was in front of a judge who shall not be named, and I kept getting my motions denied. And so I went to mentor who was an older white gentleman. We had lunch, and I was just telling him my frustration. Like, I just don't understand. I'm arguing the case law, and I don't understand why this judge keeps denying my motions. And he's just sitting there listening, and he says, all right, we'll schedule the motion again, but I'll go with you this time. All right. He said, and I said, what do you mean? She said, schedule the motion again. So I said, do I need to change it? So no, just schedule it, and I'm gonna go with you. So we go ahead and schedule the motion. And then before we walk in the courtroom, he says, let me walk in first, and then just follow behind me. And so I'm like, this is just weird. So we literally do the same. He walks into the courtroom first, and then I'm literally following behind him. He goes to the lectern. I sit at the table. He literally argues the same motion, same arguments down. He doesn't even know the case. He just argues, paragraph for paragraph, the same motion that I argued. But before we walk in the courtroom, the judge says, oh, I see we have the A team here.
Oh, wow.
Literally, and I'm like, wow. So he argues the same motion, and he gets, it's granted. And before I can even say anything, he like looks over me. He's like, just don't say anything. Just, because I'm angered right now because I've been here twice already. And
right.
You're now third time. And so we walk out. He waits till I walk out. We'll walk outside the courtroom because he's like, I don't know if they're recording. And he said, I just hope you learned a very important lesson here about practicing in this county, and said in regards to this particular judge. So
wow.
I have other instances I can relate to, but those are two stories I like to
And
highlight.
I can definitely relate to you as it relates to that and going into the courtroom, because there's been many a times I've been mistaken as either the clerk or the court reporter, or, you have to wait in the back. All interns have to wait in the back when I first started out practice. So I can definitely relate to that story. One of the things and titles that I gave you when I introduced you was that of a community organizer, Kamara. Has that role changed for you since the wake of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Elijah McClain, Breonna Taylor, and I could go on for days with many other names? How has that role as a community organizer changed for you?
Well, first I would like to say I appreciate the title community organizer, but now as I've gotten older with kids, I'm not doing as much of the work anymore.
Okay.
So as I've transitioned in my life into just being more of a family man and stay at home, my job is to support people who are actually out in the streets, organizing, doing the work, making sure they have the legal understanding what they're doing, and then obviously working background, because I think as we all get older and more sophisticated in our career, we understand that a lot of the greatest work happens in the background and creating the connections. And I've done that, I think, more or less now so than earlier when I started practicing, when I was doing rallies or trying to organize rallies or doing anything. I'm old now, so I can't be as in the streets as I want to. But I think one of the things we can do as all attorneys is continue to have a voice, not be afraid to speak truth to power. People look towards us to always not only understand the issues, but to speak clearly and articulate those issues in the rooms that certain people are not allowed to be in. So I think that's where I have actually tried to do more of, just being more bold and present and letting people know that, okay, this is what's going on. And even though I may be tired of talking about it, I have to talk about it because I'm the only one in the position to do so at this very moment.
Okay. And so there's a seat at the table for everybody as it relates to this,
correct?
All right.
Correct.
So Nick, I'm going to shoot the same question at you that I kind of shot at Kamara, and I'm pretty sure you're going to have a totally different answer, but I'm pretty sure everybody on this call has experienced this in some way, fashion, or form. Well, my question to you is, have you ever experienced discrimination within the legal field for being queer, and how did you handle it?
So thank you very much, Jacina, for having me. I do feel special because I'm with these great panelists. As I listen to my brother, who really is my brother, I love Kamar, it's that I have had the same experiences. I really don't know many Black attorneys who have not had that experience. Although I'm now working for Florida Department of Agriculture, Commissioner Freed, I still have had to go to court for some small things, and it never fails when I enter a courtroom. I always have the same experience, whether it's the two pews where it's like attorneys only to sign, and I go to sit down and a deputy comes over and taps my shoulder like, hey, this is for attorneys only. I'm like, yeah, I know where I'm sitting. Like, there's no confusion about where I'm supposed to be. But the sad part is, you know, when I hear that question, first I want to say this: I identify Nick here as she, her, hers. Those are my pronouns. But yet, I usually, if you see me out, I'm in a suit, I'm in a tie. Because how I identify, my dress is masculine as center, but I identify as a woman. So when we talk about have I been discriminated because of my queer identity, I'm proudly identify as a queer Black woman, absolutely. But the key is I can't separate that queerness from my Blackness. They're intersections that run together for me. So when I hear this, I just catch it all together. You know, it's like a triple whammy. When I came out to my parents, that was the concern. Realistically, I have amazing parents who are incredible allies, but they're like, you're already a woman, you're already Black in America, and now you add, you know, being LGBTQ identified. My parents were concerned. And so I'm thankful for the way in which I'm able to express myself. I work somewhere where I am allowed to be my best full self. And that's what we want from any employee. No employee can show up to any job and be their best full self when you don't appreciate or honor them showing up as their full self. So I'm trying to answer that, but I can't separate my queerness from Blackness. It all matters. Have I been on the receiving end of discrimination? 100%, absolutely. And I gave that general sense. I also won't go into names, but people can Google very easily where I worked prior to coming to Department of Agriculture. I absolutely had a general counsel who made comments out loud that were homophobic and made transphobic comments out loud in our office. I give a story that we originally started off volunteering our time at legal services, working for the state. I think you get 4 hours a month. We had a general counsel previously who very much believed in giving that time, and we all volunteered for legal services. Some of the best work I was doing, loved it. And my general counsel at the time went and a trans person came in for assistance. When my boss came back, that was the last day we ever volunteered in our office for legal services. He literally said, it followed me around the office. We will not be going back. And people later came to my office and was like, oh my God, like, Nick, what are you gonna do? It was like, what do you mean, what am I gonna do? Like, they wanted me to address it. And I was like, first, let's educate ourselves. That's perfectly legal. You would discriminate against people. First of all, we just had the Supreme Court last month finally say that it is illegal to discriminate in employment based on someone's LGBTQ identity. That was last month. I kept telling folks who were like, oh, you could get married. What's the issue? I'm like, yeah, we say in the community, you get married on Friday and fired on Monday, depending on who is heading your office. The other thing is, I say to people, even with this law being passed, it applies to businesses 15 employees and under. How many folks don't work for places like that? And that does not cover public accommodations. So I say to folks, we still have not passed the Equality Act. At a federal level, we still have not passed the Florida Competitive Workforce Act. So when I say to folks, it's difficult to prove employment discrimination. Most people not coming in, I'm getting rid of you because you're Black. I'm getting rid of you because you're gay. They're not doing that. It's some other reason. We all know if somebody doesn't want you somewhere, they could just, you supposed to be here at 8 o'clock. It's 8:03, right up.
Bye. Right. You're out.
We all know how to get rid of folks. No one, I mean, these days are giving the smoking gun, but absolutely, we all know it happens. And I'll just end with this because I want to get to other folks. When we understand the importance of intersectionality, last month was June, which is Pride Month. Right behind me over my head is Marsha P. Johnson, a Black trans woman who was at the center of the LGBTQ movement at Stonewall. But why is July Black Pride Month? Because we still understand we are always left out, our Blackness as part of that additional conversation. So I say to folks all the time, I can't leave either of my identities behind. I refuse to leave either identity behind, and I will keep doing this work. And I did not do anything. I want to be clear, I did not do anything when that general counsel said it because I had to put food on the table. That's
Can I interject with Nikki real quick?
Yes.
She makes a very salient point on something. When something happens and somebody says, Nikki, what are you going to do about it? And it's like, well, number one, to put all that pressure on Nikki is a bit unfair, but it really should, we should focus on, it doesn't have to be just Nikki. It should be like, what did you do about it when it happened? Right? Where you
call it out.
Did you actually do something? Did you address it? Because I shouldn't have to be Superman, Superwoman, you know, in order to address everything. I can't take on everything. There'd be a Justice League. You know what I mean? Like, you could be Batman, you could be, you know, Wonder Woman. Everybody can address it. I don't need to take on all these problems by myself because that becomes tiring, you know, and it can wear down. And Nikki shouldn't have to lose her job in order to take on another battle within the office.
And I like to just stay right here, Nick, with you. You said a whole lot as you were speaking.
Jacina, it's unfair to ask folks from the most marginalized to do it. We can't ask Black folks to fix racism. You can't ask queer people to fix homophobia and transphobia. So that's all.
Right. Yeah. So in saying all of that, I'm gonna circle back and ask you another question, but this is another question while we're here. What can we do in the legal community to be more inclusive of the LGBT community? What can we do to bring them in, to bring them to the table?
Well, here's what I'll say, we're already there. Now, we're not already at the table. When I hear folks who say, I don't know anybody LGBTQ, I usually roll my eyes. And if you're not, or I'm like, you of course know somebody LGBTQ, the first thing I say is, y'all would ask yourself why that person don't feel safe to come out to you. I don't know one person I have ever met that doesn't know an LGBTQ person. You do. You need to ask again, why is it I think unless you are in a bubble, a hole, somewhere, it makes no sense. So ask yourself, why is it folks have not felt safe to come out to me? Why? Like, that's the reality of it. Folks are there. Education is key. We can, like, Google is real. I do a lot of diversity and inclusion, diversity, equity, inclusion work. And I always get called in and asked by, I'll be real, a lot of white folks who say to me, Nick, how can I be less racist? How can I practice anti-racism? And I'm like, listen, first of all, I'm not the only person with Google. You literally can Google this and start there. You can't keep going to folks to do the easy work for you. So we start at places. What could you do just to acknowledge LGBTQ communities? Number one, look around your office and say, do we have LGBTQ folks working for us? If we don't, are we interested in bringing those folks in? If we are, here's the key. If you just have diversity, it doesn't matter. I'll take it because you gave someone an opportunity and a job, but that's called tokenism, okay? We're not interested in tokenism. So what you have to do is bring somebody in and, number one, give them a real seat at the table, and then also create safe spaces for them to work. Do you know how many calls I get from LGBTQ lawyers who are like, it's a joke or something like, I should have known you were gay. I look to men, let's be real. A lot of gay men I know who are lawyers practicing have reached out to me and they say, oh, when I do come out, people are like, oh my God, we could be best friends and shop together. Wow. Like this sort of behavior, Queenie type behavior where we're not acknowledging, you know, it's not a monolithic community. Everybody comes from different spaces and places. Are you creating safety? You know, have you addressed bathrooms? Do you have gender neutral classrooms, your healthcare policies. Do you include gender reassignment surgeries as part of your healthcare, partner benefits? If you have a lesbian couple or any LGBTQ couple, do you have IVF as part of your healthcare plan? Do you participate in Pride Month and on your social media pages acknowledge, that plight? Do you work with organizations that do this work? There's so many small things folks can do if you want it to be more inclusive. So when they don't, I assume you don't really want to, because it's not hard. What you don't know, bring in an expert. Bring in an expert. I have personally spoken at multiple law firms for free because I cared about doing it for the community, but I want to caution. If you have money to pay people, pay folks to do this work if it's important to you.
Wow. Well, Nick, you just said a mouthful, because I have definitely played that token person on a number of different occasions. So I thank you for everything that you have said. So I'm going to now move on to LaShawnda. And LaShawnda, recently there was a ABA article that stated that 70% of female minority lawyers report leaving or consider leaving the legal profession. And I know I have baffled and felt like I never had a seat at the table, couldn't assimilate, didn't fit in, and wanted to walk away from this profession a number of times. Have you ever felt this pressure? And if so, why, as an African-American female on this panel?
I think about leaving the practice of law every day when I'm sitting in my chair doing hours, working to the wee hours of the night. I don't know if it has anything to do with being an African-American woman. One of the things I can say, I think we need to realize is that it's kind of been said today, we do have our struggles. There are things, that cause us to boil over, things that make us not want to practice, but we do have to have some of us who stick in there, some of us who pave the way for others. We talked about tokenism. I always used to joke around. I said, listen, I'll be your token, but you got to pay me for it, okay? And one of the things and I also believe in that, because if I hadn't stayed where I am today, what would happen to the diversity within my firm? Who's going to be recruiting diverse people? Who are going to be eyeing people when I go to Paul C. Perkins meetings or other meetings and saying, hey, here's a really good candidate you guys should consider. So it is hard. But I don't know that that's the reason that I ever thought I would leave the practice of law. But it's a reason I believe I need to stay in the practice of law and stay where I am to bring other people, who are behind me. I was the first, I believe, Black female partner at my firm. I'm trying to recruit more. We have, a lot more diverse attorneys now than when I first started. I was the only one for quite some time. But now we have other Black, attorneys within our office. So that would be my response.
Okay, so that same article that I was speaking of also stated that 2% of equity partners at large law firms are women of color, a statistic that has stayed the same for 20 years, 2%. Was your journey to partner different being an African-American woman? And could you share that journey and the obstacles that you had to face to get there?
I'm a non-equity partner, I'll tell you that. Okay. So it is true. And I don't believe we have any Black, we only have 2 Black partners in our firm, and neither one of us are equity partners. So it is hard. And we kind of start, at a disadvantage. We, disadvantage in a lot of different things, the networks, the people. I often see a lot of times, there are certain communities that are very highly connected. Take, for example, the Jewish community. They go to their lawyers, they promote their lawyers, they refer to their lawyers. We don't see that in our community. And so that kind of hurts us when it comes to trying to bring in the business, trying to bring in the book of business or our network and our contacts to be able to say to them, you should make me an equity partner. So I think that's very important. One of the other things I think I can say, is just getting people over stereotypes a lot of times. I still remember when I was a young attorney and somebody said to me, oh my gosh, I'm so surprised you're such a good writer. Why are you surprised that I'm a good writer? Why not just take me for who I am and accept the fact that I'm a good writer? Doesn't matter what I look like or what my sex is. So I think that a lot of times hurts people because people are biased. They have this perception. that we can't do the same thing as our white male counterparts. We can't bring in the business that our white counterparts do. We don't have the connections, which to some extent we don't, but I still think we have to make our value. And so for me, it was, yes, I'm at a disadvantage when it comes to the type of people I know, the network and the people of the business, but I need to make myself invaluable. And for me, it was my trial skills. It was my community service. It was getting the firm's name out there. So there were different ways that you can help promote yourself. And I encourage a lot of other people to do that as well.
So LaShawnda, the voice that you, go ahead, Kamara, I'm sorry.
If I may, I want to say something, LaShawnda. So LaShawnda actually represents, for when I was coming up in the legal community, LaShawnda, what we would actually talk within our own Black circles as one of the jewels of our Black legal circles, because we recognize her unique position within Central Florida, and the fact that, you know, she was a rarity, not only as a Black person in a big firm, just as a Black woman who was holding up as a equity partner, and or not as a non-equity partner, just a partner in general. And LaShawnda doesn't know that, but you know, we would always we would talk about, like, man, like LaShawnda Jackson. And there was Camille Evans, who used to work at another big firm before starting her own law firm, Invictus Law Group. And you know, it's a handful, and it's actually a shame that, I know LaShawnda could say the same thing, we can actually name on one hand how many Black partners are in Central Florida with big firms. You know, but it was important that she says, I needed to stick into the room, because if she's not there, then who was there? And I think sometimes that's a point that's not, it's not, you know, fleshed out. Because why does she have to feel like she's the only person? Why does she have to feel like she's the only person who can represent an entire segment of a legal population? And I don't know if it's really something that LaShawnda can reconcile, but it's something definitely her firm and the big firm, you know, I guess environment should be able to recognize. And so I don't know, I just wanted to actually highlight that. And you know, I'm sorry, LaShawnda, I didn't want to take some of your steam out, but
Jacina,
continue.
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead, Doriki.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one other comment. You know, it was mentioned that I represent the Office of Human Rights here in Pinellas County, and I'm sure that all of my fellow panelists would agree. When, you know, let's just be honest, the law is a business, right? And there is an air of familiarity that some people share when they walk into a room. And when you talk about implicit bias and ways to remedy anti-discrimination, one of the things we work on here in Pinellas County through our Office of Human Rights is identifying those biases as soon as you know, connect with someone. All of my classmates who know me know I was a networker. I started networking before I got to law school with my law school classmates. I would be on campus for an extra hour talking to people outside of the library. I was president of my student bar association. I did a lot of, you know, different things. And when I got out of law school, I had a hard time, right? Because I had to try and figure out, okay, I made connections with my colleagues who I'm going to come up through this profession with. But when you're competing against people who perhaps just grew up in neighborhoods where the next door neighbor was an attorney, or, you know, their parents were friends with the judge, their framework and the way they looked, the legal profession was so much different. Oh, sorry, I'll fix that in a second. So when individuals are, you know, looking at getting promoted to partnership, or they're trying to show what type of value they bring to the profession, they are in somewhat of a different, you know, position if you're starting literally when you start law school, trying to build your network. And I know that's not, you know, specific just to African-American attorneys. Many people face that. But for us, I think we're disproportionately represented in that group of people when we're trying to show our value, you know. And we all know, we've been in places where we know it's not just the work. It's not just how good you are in trial. It's not just how good you write. It's a whole network of connections that kind of run attendant with that create some of the most lucrative opportunities within this profession. And, you know, we have to fix that. And when you talk about the African-American community, remember, man, folks just started letting us go to some of these schools in my lifetime. My father is 80, you know? So he was in his 20s when the civil rights movement happened. This wasn't some long, far away, you know, time period, you know, like the intro to a Star Wars movie. This stuff is in our lifetimes, right? So when I went to law school, my parents were like, you know, yeah, we, you know, served in the armed services. Yeah, we run businesses. Son, you on your own, you know? So when I heard LaShawnda talking, like it meant something to me because I know, you know, for us to get into some of these positions is not diminishing the hard work that anyone else does, because undoubtedly they work hard and they deserve to be praised for it. But it really is, like, at least for me, fumbling your way through oftentimes. You know, it's hard to find mentors. And we talk about implicit bias, you know, it's easy to connect with someone who you identify with. You know, that's something that Nick was talking about. Talking about another human being as if they are an it, right? That just underlies a gross amount of misidentification with that person as a person, you know? So when you are an attorney and you go in for an interview, you're right, they're not getting the job. They're not getting the promotion. They're not getting brought in onto a deal that's going to help them cultivate, you know, business going forward. And when they get kicked out of that office or that firm, they're going to say they weren't a good fit, they didn't make the cut, and everybody's going to say, you know, hey, this is why we don't hire them. They don't really pan out. And no one's going to listen to these stories because, let's be real, it's not safe to talk about it, especially in a private firm. You know, once you discuss it, you're probably going to be between a rock and a hard place. So that's something as far as the implicit bias that's there. If you want to remedy it, one of the best ways to do it is, you know, if you know you're going out golfing with somebody, take them. I've never been invited to go golfing anywhere that I've worked, and I know people golf, right? You know, that's how you get to know me. I might surprise you, might have beginner's luck. The only time I went golfing is with a community service group in Atlanta full of Black men. So what does that tell you about how networking is done? If we're only networking with people that look like us, it's going to be a problem, right? And I can tell you it's usually not the African Americans that don't want to network with the other groups of people. There's just, you know, be it, you know, inadvertence or lack of attention or maybe even something intentional, those opportunities just don't always present themselves to us.
Jacina, may I jump in for a minute, please? I just read a comment on there.
Yes,
Somebody
I was going to bring that
comment that I made a generalization by. I'm, for one, I'll tell you, I am biased. We all have biases. My comment wasn't intended to be a biased comment. For me, it was, I work with people and I'm learning. My point was, I don't know how to network when I came out to get the business because I didn't have the context. I work with a lot of people, and one of the people who has been my mentor in building work explained to me and showed me how his community, which is a Jewish community, how they network, how they connect, how they're able to establish themselves, and how they're able to get work out of that. That was an example I was given on something that I learned for myself, that I didn't have those skills. So it wasn't a generalization, and it wasn't an attack on Jewish community. I actually thought it was a great idea. It helped me learn, and it helped me to get where I am, because that's what my mentor shared with me on how to network and how he does it within his community.
Jacina, can I also add this? LaShawnda, I love when I see Black women doing incredible things. But I want to throw this out because, Derek, I know you mentioned it as well. Just because I do a lot of training around this concept, us being the first somewhere is not tokenism in and of itself. So it goes to what was the intention, which is why I talked about what do we mean when we say we want diversity and inclusion. I have been the first Black person many places. What I say to folks is, I will never be your token. Don't invite me in spaces where you're not actually ready to do the work. And I do understand this, because I have turned down opportunities because I knew folks wanted me as a token. I'm not okay with that. What I will say is I will sit and be the first at a table as long as you understand I'm going to bring other folks to this table. And I admit I'm a state worker. So I have missed out on some financial opportunities because it's not in my spirit to do it. I can't sit at tables and not invite folks in. So understanding it's a lot of places, we've got to break that glass ceiling. I saw a number the other day and it was shocking and it should not have been. But of all our Fortune 500 companies in America, 4 have Black CEOs. 4. Like that ought to say something to us. So when we talk about it's okay, I love when places open up and say, we're going to bring someone in, but then the question becomes, what did we do when we have that space? And if we're holding folks' feet to the fire, if we're bringing in other folks that look like us and giving opportunities, then that's what we are supposed to do. That's how we create space. And that's not tokenism. That's just trailblazing. And I want us to sort of be clear because I get asked that all the time. What do we mean by that? And there is a difference.
Okay. Anybody else want to make any comments?
So I think what Nikki's, she's so eloquently stated, she's talking about the intentionality of things, right? And the intentionality of the person doing the hiring. And are you doing the hiring to fill a quota or to fill a need? You know, and there's 2 different things, right? To fill a quota means like, all right, I just checked off a box, right? And I don't really have to address it anymore. But to fill a need, to understand the needs are always they're always growing, and they're never conditioned to, okay, you never stop needing something. You never stop needing water, never stop needing food, you never stop needing sleep, right? And you have to continually operate with addressing that. So you bring in somebody because you feel a need, because you say, hey, we need diversity in here, all right? And that doesn't mean you stop.
Well, what is the benefit of that? What is the benefit of that diversity though, Kamara? Because a lot of times it's just, we just want to check the box of having an African-American or any other person of color in the office. But what is the need for having that diversity within the office?
It brings different voices and perspective, right? Because oftentimes there's a myopic understanding of issues and views that if you're not familiarized with a particular community or understanding of a particular concept, you're like, okay, this is how this is going to go. This is how this case is going to function. I remember being on a case with another firm, and it was a construction litigation case, and it was, you know, we're a small firm and we're partnering up with another firm on this case, and there was a particular issue regarding defects and how it affects a person living in that particular house. And you know, they were framing the argument, and we're getting ready to talk about you know, how is it going to be approached to the judge and how it would look to the jury. And I said, well, listen, I understand your idea, but let me tell you this, like, this is how someone who's Black, this is a Black person living in this house, this is why this is important. And you know, you're using a generalized argument that may or may not address really why it's an issue for them to be dealing with this construction defect. And it was interesting because they were like, I never thought about it like that. But there's a lot of issues within a legal argument that provide context that if you don't have somebody who comes from a background, you're not going to get that argument. You're not going to get that statement. And a lot of times firms, you know, they shoot themselves in the foot because they want to get somebody who's willing to just say, okay, you know, I'm just going to go along to get along. And not because I'm willing to do something to say, all right, well, I'm going to put my foot down. This is why we need something. And this is why I'm going to speak truth to power. I will tell you, I've been approached by firms. In the beginning, I was not approached by firms. I actually put out, I remember, I like to tell the story to young attorneys. I put out 100 applications. I didn't get a call once. And then I changed my name on one of the resumes, and I actually got a call back from a firm. But in my practice now, you know, I've gotten to a place where firms have come to consider, quote unquote, buying us out. And I've had those lunches, I've taken on those meetings. And one of the things I've said to them is that, listen, I'm not comfortable with being bought out, because if the conversation is going to be me changing how I operate, as far as advocacy, whether social media or just period, then I can't do that. And in light of what the offer might be, my voice is important to certain people who look towards me to speak on certain issues. And for that matter, I would want to bring other people with me, because I don't want to just be the only person in the building, because that gets stressful as well. And so, those are where, when I talk about intentionality and those conversations go, you have to check the people who are doing the hiring and say, what is your intention, right? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? Where do I fit in with that construct of your objective? And then I have to be okay with that. So
I can tell you the times that I did think about leaving the legal profession, it was because I had to, every room that I stepped in, I felt like I had to assimilate or water down or wash down my Blackness in order to be able to fit in the room. And that just gets exhausting from day to day when I can't be myself or I can't voice my opinion, and my opinion will not be heard at the table. So that was me as a younger attorney. Now I do a lot of listening, and then I interject and say what it is, or call it out when it's being brought in a room where I'm feeling uncomfortable. Because as a young attorney, it is just very hard to just assimilate in some of the legal settings, the bar associations, and to be fully accepted. Has any of you on the call had to assimilate to be accepted into the room, or to get the job or to get the position? And I would love to hear, how did you conquer that, or what did you do to move past that?
Yeah, I would say, unlike a lot of my colleagues, I'm newer to the profession. So I'm only on my second legal, position, and I really enjoy what I do every day. But, just speaking generally about assimilation, it kind of goes back to the work I talk about that we do in the county with implicit bias. We all understand that if you were just to make an objective checklist, in many ways, we have much more in common than we have that separates us. When you talk about diversity, it's embracing precisely the parts of individuals that are different from yourself and saying, I'm okay with that too. Right? And that's where we get into a problem, because it becomes an issue. Like, I'll tell you right now, I make a decision on whether to wear contacts or glasses, and I will never wear contacts because I think that glasses soften my image. Because I'm aware as a Black man that, there's a myriad of stereotypes that people associate with me. And I know it may, have or will, in some instances, have an impact on how those folks interact with me when I'm talking with them. So to me, I found that glasses are an assimilation tactic. When I'm not at work, you'd be hard pressed to find me in just a regular t-shirt, because I found that polo shirts do something to my image when I'm interacting with folks. And some people will say, oh man, you soft, you shouldn't be doing that. But this is my life, this is my existence. Anything that reduces that bit of stress that I carry around with me from trying to make sure that I don't offend this society by just my very existence, that's up for me to do. You know what I mean? But when we talk about, ways to remedy that problem, because I want to give our listeners some solutions, I just want to stress this point. Everybody from MLK to even James Comey, the former FBI director, has said it in some certain circumstances. It's hard to hate up close, right? It's hard to hate someone, unless you just have an objective phobia against that group of people, if you're interacting with them on a regular basis. So, for many of us on this call, we know literally hundreds of white people, There are very few white people that can say the same about the African-American community. So if you find yourself with some of these feelings, or feeling like, man, like, why don't people feel comfortable interacting with me? It's probably because we just don't have as much of an exchange of ideas as is necessary, an exchange of interactions, right? So hang out with people, like, I think everybody thinks there has to be some corporate boardroom meeting where you're talking about this. You don't have to have like a specialist come in and tell you just to, have a casual interaction with another person that's appropriate, just, merely just acknowledging people is important, you know. And I'll let you speak, Nick. I just want to share a story I had in a personal setting. I'm from South Florida, a large boating community. My family doesn't own a boat, but we rent boats constantly. And one of the things that always impressed me about that community was we would go out and everybody's waving to each other. Like, you know, you ride past on the boat, didn't matter, black, white, whatever. And those simple gestures of acknowledgement, you know, meant something, because it was like, okay, I'm welcome here. You know, when somebody nods when they see you. I went out and took my father out for Father's Day. Totally different experience this most recent time. And I won't ponder about why that was. I waved at people. They would turn their heads. They pretend like they didn't see me. And I mean, you're on a boat, so you got to be watching where everyone else is. And it's like, man, like, am I not here? You know? And that was an eerie feeling for me. And it wasn't something that felt comfortable. And I'm like, you know, you don't necessarily have to agree with what everyone's saying. Or, you know, I'm pretty sure even on this phone call, we'd all disagree about a lot of things. But there can be civil discourse, there can be respect, there can be, you know, interactions without having to alienate or, you know, persecute someone who has a different viewpoint from you or you perceive to be different from you.
Nick, I actually have a question for you specifically that was typed out in the chat. So I'm gonna let you go. You can respond to Ricky, but I want to read this question so you can also respond to that.
Okay.
So the question says, whenever you may have appeared before an African-American judge or other person sitting in a position of high authority, do you recall specific instances thereabouts of discrimination or scorn based upon your gender identification? And if so, how did you respond? And then I also have one more question, but that one was specifically to you.
So here's the sad part. I do not recall ever practicing in front of a black judge. Be real. I'm going to keep it real. I started with the public defender's office and I was out in Gadsden County. All the judges were white. Every state attorney was white. When I moved to Leon County, I'm from Leon County. When I moved over from Gadsden to Leon County, I was practicing in front of white judges. I clerked for a black judge, Judge Nikki Clark, when I was in law school, and I'm super thankful for that opportunity and experience. I now live in Broward, where I know there are more black judges, but we aren't even addressing the fact that we are missing and not as represented on the bench in relation, in proportion to the population. So I would love to share that. It sort of gets into some of the issues that we deal with in our black community around homophobia, transphobia, which I will gladly sort of offline if you want to have a discussion, but can I address one thing really quickly? And,
yes.
and I love that we have a panel, and I want to say, my conscience will not allow this to go. Deirdre, I love what you shared. However, I have to caution. I don't think we're going to solve any of these problems if people simply get up close and meet me. Because what I experienced growing up and going to a predominantly white school was I would always hear, but Nick, you are other. You speak differently, so you're okay. To my brother, your pants are up, so you're not like them. How many of us on this call have been told, well, you're not really black? So let's be clear that even when they get up close, there's this way that we can make folks other. And what I argue is it has to be done in a boardroom. We have to bring skilled folks in, because that us being nice to one another, I had someone when I did a DEI workshop recently, I had one lady and I had to take a breath because she was like, if we could just all learn to love one another better. And I'm like, systems of oppression are beyond us talking about loving one another. That doesn't explain the pay inequality gaps that we have black folks versus white, brown folks versus white. That doesn't explain a gender pay gap between women and men. That doesn't explain how when you then add my queerness, I make even less. At my last job had been one of the senior attorneys, but was still paid the least amount in our state. So we can say that it's about niceness, but when white families' average wealth is $170,000 and black folks, it's a few hundred, it's not about if we could simply learn to be up close and personal, because we still are a society that will quickly other you. Oh, You safe, you made it. Let's be real. I've walked into plenty of places. Folks will look past me and then someone says, oh, y'all know Nick is a lawyer. Suddenly you got conversation for me. I was recently sitting with the sheriff who was talking about race relations, and there was a brother who was 300 pounds, 6 foot plus, who cried like a baby in that meeting because he shared that he got pulled over when he signed with, I hope I could say this, with the Dolphins, playing for Miami. He's now retired. He had a Monte Carlo his parents had purchased him in college that he never let go of. He could have afforded a Lambo, a Ferrari. He kept it because it was what his parents could afford. He got stopped twice first day going to training camp by 2 different police officers who took him out of the car, and he was roughed up. And he said, he cried like a baby and said, if he had just given me a chance to talk, I was going to let him know. No, I went to University of Florida and I play for the Dolphins. If you just give me a chance to speak to you. And what I say to folks, and I went to him and I'm like, you shouldn't have had to open your mouth to be treated with decency. That officer shouldn't have had to get to know you, to treat you like a regular traffic stop, to answer why you were pulled over. I think when we do that, we forget the folks who don't have degrees. We forget the folks who may not speak proper English, as we call it, or Ebonics, whatever we want to call it, or street slang. We forget the folks that don't have any money or means to handle situations. So I want to be careful that I do believe it has to happen at a corporate level. It has to happen with partners. It has to happen in an official capacity for us to really bring in experts to get to the bottom of it, because this whole thing of us being nice to one another will not stop George Floyd from being murdered. He was nice and somebody still thought it was a fake $20. He was nice and still pulled out of that car. Breonna Taylor was sleeping in a bed. Sandra Bland was headed to a job interview and had a busted tail light. Our niceness will not save us. And I need us to understand that and keep forcing folks to be accountable. Bring in a real trainer. Bring in folks to do real work. Don't let this be a one-time conversation. I just think we need to be clear. It's going to take more than that. But I love, and I'm going to say this, that you're doing whatever it takes to stay safe, and I want you to do that. We can't afford to lose you. We can't afford to lose our brothers and sisters and our siblings. We can't.
Sure. And I just want to jump in and say, Nick, I appreciate you pointing it out, because I don't want my comments to be misinterpreted for any of our panelists. And I know you've got a lot of experience, in this field and space, and that's the value to the panel. So I appreciate you, offering a clarification on my behalf, and I think it's well received. And to anyone listening, I do want to be clear when I'm talking about, just the proximity that doesn't exist there. I think Nick and I are talking about the same issue. You can have corporate board meetings, you can bring in specialists, but if you don't interact with those people and implement what those specialists are telling you, you're not going to get results, and simple, I attempted to do this with my statement, but simple proximity has to also include embracing aspects of the people that you would otherwise want to other or, separate from yourself. So, my idea of an interaction, and perhaps it wasn't communicated, out, and I appreciate that clarification, is, my best friend is watching this and he's white, right? And that's part of that simple interaction was, hey, bro, you got to pay attention to this panel because you're in a big law firm. You're going to be a partner. You're one of the smartest people I know. And you didn't get to where you got because of, you just were mediocre. He's an exceptional person. But when you get in that position, I expect you to be aware of the power and the obligation and responsibility you have to communities like the communities we're talking about on the phone. And I think that our interaction is more emblematic of what I'm trying to talk about, which isn't just, being nice. I've used the boat thing to talk about, historically, that's a precursor to something bad when you don't acknowledge that your neighbors are right there. We've seen that happen all over the world, and in different phases throughout history. So Nick, I really appreciate your clarification and it's well received. And I hope we can talk, later and you can be-
I look forward to it.
Of course. And I thank you so much for that.
All right, I have one question because we're at 12:55 and attendees, the reason that we did all of this was to get it out, to discuss these heavy issues. So one of the questions I have, it says, I read recently that there are two trains of thought when it comes to addressing these problems. There seems to be one belief that people of privilege should not and cannot address these issues or educate others on these issues. Instead, they should leave these to organizations and people who are already doing the work and should refer others there. The other belief is that everyone can educate and advocate. The author of the statement is a white woman who was trying to organize a conversation on race and Black Lives Matters. Hold on, trying to, it went away as I was, The author of the statement is a white woman who was trying to organize a conversation on race and Black Lives Matter. When she posted on her social media, she received several negative comments. Do any of the panelists have thoughts on either position, and is this something that organizations / bar associations should be aware of? So anybody can jump at that, because we got it's 12:56, so whoever wants to take
I'll do a short comment on that. First of all, I think we need to stop with the labels, the people of privilege. It needs to be a conversation with everybody. It can't just be the Black organizations, the Black communities. It has to be something that we all do together. I just recently had a conversation with our local mayor, and he was talking about, the protests and everything that was going on and how he's reaching out to the Black churches. I said, have you reached out to the white churches? Have you reached out to the other communities? Because that's what it's going to take for all of us to work together to make diversity a issue that someday we don't have to address. I'll leave my comment simple on that.
I'll jump in quick.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we can walk and chew gum. I actually don't think those comments, unless I misunderstood, are in conflict with one another. You should be doing all of those things. You should acknowledge your privilege. You should be doing what you can to still try to make race relations better, to be anti-racist. You should be bringing in experts who do trainings. You should be working with experts. We're lawyers. When are we not looking for experts? I mean, that's the whole point. You want the best when people go out and hire. So why would you not hire an expert and work with organizations that do this work? I will give just one point of caution. I agree with LaShawnda saying we need to all come together to fix it, but let's be clear, we don't want a melting pot, we want a salad bowl. Don't not acknowledge my Blackness, don't not acknowledge your privilege. Those aren't bad things, because we do need to go to Black churches because there's a different conversation happening there. You do need to go to white churches because there's a conversation that's happening there. You need to go all these places, but remember, I don't want a melting pot. See my Blackness, honor my Blackness. I need you to see your privilege. If you can't acknowledge that, then you can't really help me if you don't see that whiteness is a privilege. But I don't want you to get stuck there. I don't need you to get stuck in guilt phases. That doesn't help me. That doesn't help anybody. But we can acknowledge one another and move on all fronts and do all of those things.
So I was going to say, Nikki just already articulated, I don't see those statements unless, it went over my head. I don't see them being mutually exclusive. I would like to see the comments under that original statement. But from my experience, it has been people who are in positions of privilege, not only utilizing their position, but also bringing me along and involved in the conversation and saying that, hey, you know what? I can speak on this, but here's somebody else that's probably better suited to talk about this. But they first needed to use their privilege to get through the door in order to then they brought me along with them to say, okay, well, I know you guys were expecting me to say something, but here's this person that's going to sit at the table. And that's what I would say. It's important that we utilize, and even for me as a male, it's just male, right? So I can speak on certain things, but I would say, hey, you know what? I'm going to let a colleague of mine who's a woman who's actually better suited to speak on this issue. I know you guys want to hear from me, or I'm going to allow somebody who is part of the LGBTQIA community to speak on this, because I am probably not the best person to speak on this issue, right? And so it's understanding that we all operate within a scale of you know, a privilege in a sense, and understanding that we may not be the best suited, but we can still continue the conversation or further the conversation along.
You guys, my heart is tremendously full right now. I thank each and every one of you for participating. It is 1:01, so we have pretty much maxed out our time. Any of the panel members that are here today can be found on the Florida Bar website. If you want to continue the conversation, reach out, thank them for their comments and their participation here today. As I stated earlier, if you attended this CLE, you have to log your own credit. The course number is 4048. I would like to thank Ricky Libert, Linda Calvert-Hanson, Lisa Tipton, Jennifer Kirkendall, Tim Shaw, and all of my other members of the Solo Small Firm section. And I thank each of you for participating here today. This has been awesome. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
For attending.
Thank you.